Hey, what's happening, everybody? I'm Larry Roberts, and this is another episode of the Readily Random Podcast.
Hey, you could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes and dreams of every boy and every girl. You could fly high.
You know you got a pretty decent theme song when your guest for the night is who I have, and I look up and he's snapping to the beat, so I can kind of dig that. Tonight I've got somebody that is really, it's mind-numbing that he's even here. I'm going to have a hard time talking probably. Oh. No, probably not, to be honest with you. I can talk in just about any circumstance. But tonight I have with me none other than former Pink Floyd member, former Toto band member, former Supertramp band member, former Gorky Park band member, and
Gorky Park? Holy cow, how did you remember? Dude.
Man, come on now. I did my homework, so.
That's like crazy. Well, I wasn't a member of Gorky Park, but I played with him in Russia when we did the Moscow Music Peace Fest. Yeah.
I was close. Well, with no further ado, Mr. Scott Page is with us tonight. And Scott.
Oh, hello.
Thank you so much,
Nice
man.
to talk to you. I'm here from my car because I'm stuck in we're actually writing a song for a movie right now, and we're in a writing session. I thought I'd be home, but I'm not, so you're getting car cam. So we're in the car, and I'm very thankful to be here. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. It really, really is. You know, when Mark Victor Hansen said, hey, I know somebody from Pink Floyd, I can connect you. I was like, no, come on, Mark. And he, sure enough.
By the way, Mark is the greatest. I mean, he is, first of all, he's such an amazing thought leader. And, you know, what he's done writing those books, and, you know, him and his wife are just wonderful people. So, you know, I was actually, as soon as he said, listen, Mark called me up. People hit me up for these things all the time. And
sure.
Mark hit me up and said, you need to go talk to my buddy here. He's doing the show. Would you do it? And I said, if he's recommending it, I'm in.
That's so awesome.
I'm very thankful. Thankful to be here.
We had a great conversation. He and his wife and I, we got together. We just had a heck of a time. So hopefully you and I will as well. So
already having a blast, my brother.
Good. So yeah, like I said, you know, I did my homework, and as musicians go, I mean, you've kind of done a lot with your career.
It means I'm old.
Well, we're all getting there, man. We're all on our way. You know, it's interesting. How did you go? Because your path, you started off with the trumpet.
Dude,
and then
I can't even believe this.
You progressed through some of the other wind instruments and ended up with the saxophone. And
yeah,
I mean, the thing that gets me the most, and you probably have people tell you this, but when I heard that was you on Dogs of War, and then I knew I was going to talk to you, it meant even more because that sax solo, I've literally cried to it before. I mean, that's how Pink Floyd is to me, and that's how that sax solo is. It's amazing. It just moves me every time. And
thank you so much.
I need to understand something, because you have played in a number of bands, and you played with a number of bands, been in a number of bands. How do you go? Now, I don't play an instrument, so this is coming from a place of pure ignorance. How do you go from one style of music to another and do it so soulfully?
Boy, that's an interesting question, you know. And again, I think, you know, the way I look at myself as a musician, I'm really more, I have friends that are, I know saxophone players, and they're like monster freaking scales, blah, 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 all this stuff. And I took more of a stylist approach. And, you know, Dave Gilmour changed my life because he made me really think about melody differently. I mean, David, to me, is the master of melody. His guitar solos are ones that you're memorable. I mean, you listen to those songs, Comfortably Numb and all those tunes, and without the guitar solo, it feels like somebody left something out, right?
Well, yeah.
You know, I actually am, I would say I'm not really great at all styles. I really sort of honed in on kind of the rock, R&B, funk kind of space. I wish I could play jazz. I've actually taken this COVID experience and being home, and I started really learning how to play some bebop. And so I'm actually having a blast right now, learning a style of music that I was never really very good at, and I'm trying to learn. But, you know, I always took the approach. A gentleman by the name of Michael Smotherman said to me one time, he says, dude, it ain't what you play, it's what you say. And that hit me really hard, because I realized that the greatest musicians that I've ever known will kill me with one note. It's not about the gymnastics about that. It's like, you know, B.B. King will kill you with a little simple lick. Dave Gilmour. You never hear him go, he
Right.
never does. He always plays a da, 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 something that people can manage. So I took the approach of like saying, I'm going to be more of a stylist and play more of a melodic sense. And actually, what's interesting for me is I was an alto saxophone player, right? And I was trying to play jazz and all that kind of stuff. And then I had a friend of mine call me up and he said, dude, you got to hear this. There's a record. It's called First Flight. You got to go hear this saxophone player. The guy's name's David Sanborn, right? So I went out that night to Tower Records, bought the record, came home, put that on and said, I'm never playing the alto saxophone again. So at that time, because when I heard Sanborn, he was so unique and everything about his sound and the way he played, I just knew that every saxophone player in the world was going to go chase that. And so while everybody else was going, you know, that kind of shit, I decided to say, okay, wait a minute, let's think about this. Name the jazz saxophone player. So I'd go, Fathead Newman, Lockjaw Davis, Ben Webster, Ike Quebec, Charlie Parker, Cannonball, blah, blah. And then I said, let's name the rock and roll saxophone players. And I went, okay, Junior Walker, King Curtis, Bobby Keys from the Stones, Clarence Clemens, and then it stops, right? And
Right.
I said, I'm going to move into that mark. So what I ended up doing was saying, while everybody else was going, I would go, and I decided to play rock and roll and focused my whole career there because I figured there was really, the competition was very small.
Right. Right.
So I'm a business guy. Everything I do, I think about. Been a startup. I've started up 4 companies. I'm in my 4th company right now. I love startup. I love business. So I'm always looked at trying to understand kind of the market where things are at. So I changed my whole story in that. So going back to your question, playing all the styles, I really only learned to play kind of one style. It was more on the rock and R&B because that's kind of what it needed. And really what helped me the most is I also play guitar and stuff. So I followed in my father's footsteps, who was a multi-instrumentalist studio musician. He played 14 different instruments. I mean, he said, listen, if you can play a variety of things, it makes you a little more valuable in the marketplace. So a lot of these bands would say, yeah, I need somebody to play some guitar and maybe a little keyboard and stuff. But I'd love to have a saxophone player too, but we can't have both. So I kind of filled that niche of being that kind of utility guy that could kind of play varieties of different things.
Gotcha. And, you know, that's kind of interesting because I went back after knowing that I was going to speak to you and I was really analyzing Momentary Lapse of Reason because that's where you came into the Pink Floyd.
Right.
You joined Floyd on that album and that tour.
Tours, yep.
But I didn't hear, at least I didn't pick up on a lot of sax outside of anything but obviously Dogs of War. Were you playing rhythm guitar on some of the other songs, or how did you feel?
Oh yeah, I played on Floyd. I played rhythm guitar and saxophone. You know, I played. I did all the all the Dark Side of the Moon stuff, the original stuff Dick Perry played originally. What I loved about it was Gilmour was so wonderful in not saying, "Hey, can you play like Dick? Do what he did." And he never once. It's so funny. I always thought when I came to the gig, all Gilmour just said, point to me and said, play. Just play whatever I want. So, of course, I would go back and I would say, well, wait a minute. You know, those Dick Perry solos on those things were important. So I would always nod a little bit to it, start it out his way, and then I'd play my own thing. And I always thought it was funny that, you know, it was the easiest job I've ever had in my life was playing on Floyd because it was just play a solo when it's time to play. And then I played rhythm guitar on parts and things. And, you know, I loved playing rhythm guitar because that would allow me to walk around. And one of my favorite things is I used to walk over and stand in front of Dave's amp when he did Comfortably Numb. So I imagine my back, I could feel the sound pressure levels coming off of the back of the speaker, blazing my ears, and him playing that solo. And it was like heaven, like, you know, standing next to Gilmour. I mean, really, that guy is, you know, he's my musical mentor. I mean, he taught me a lot about music and more about, it's not what you play, it's what you say, right? It's about playing, because he'll kill you. He'll knock your socks off when he doesn't play anything with the spaces that he leaves in his melodies. Again, I feel so blessed to have been able to play with him. And, you know, all the bands, you know, Supertramp was another incredible opportunity for me playing with them. You know, John Helliwell's he's my life guru. That guy he loves quality more than anybody I've ever seen. I used to laugh. We did a tour. We called it the Dining Tour when we went to Europe, represent an album we did. It was basically marketing an album. We were doing TV shows, and we called it the dining tour because the Supertramp guys, they were really into gourmet and cooking and stuff. So every night the record company would have it set up with whoever whatever country or town we were in or wherever, the best chef and the best stuff. And we'd go in there and we'd have these incredible meals every night with these chefs that would come in and, $1,000 bottles of wine. It was like, pretty decadent stuff. And John Helliwell, he's one of those guys that he becomes so present when he does something. It was like, I learned so much. He would take a bite of food and you would see his eyes go completely blank. Nothing else would happen is he would be tasting that food at the deepest level. He was so into that. I mean, I kept watching him all the time. I would watch him. He used to collect, what do they call those little knives? The famous little red knife. What is it? The Swiss Army knife.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yes.
He was a collector of those, and he'd collect them all over the world because there's all these different ones. And I saw him one day, he bought one, and I looked over at him in the dressing room. He was over in the dressing room. He was like, just playing with that Swiss Army knife for like 15 minutes, looking at every little piece. So he was the guy that made me realize, wait a minute, it's all about presence. It's about experiencing that moment. And John really changed my life in that sense that, I always talk about this. The only thing that's real is you and me talking right now.
Right.
Everybody out there realize this. Everything else is an illusion. 2 minutes ago, I can't touch it. I can't change it. 2 minutes from now, I have no idea. And so the reality of the thing is the only thing that's real is what we're doing at this very moment. And once you start to grasp that at the deepest level, you just realize that the future doesn't matter. The past is goofy. Why? It makes no sense. All I got to do is make sure what I'm doing right at this moment is at the highest level. And John Helliwell was the one that really taught me that lesson. And it's one of those lessons that really changed my life dramatically.
Wow, that's pretty amazing because, I say similar things, but I'm definitely going to build on it now that I'm talking to you in the podcasting space because, podcasting it's open to everybody. It's open source is what it is. And, it's real easy to get in, but it's very, very difficult to do it well. And Absolutely. I think a lot of it is because people do not savor the flavor of the moment. Or Absolutely. They look past it. They go, "Oh, I can't wait to release this because I've got so and so coming," and they don't even enjoy the moment. Or
that's the problem, right, man? Because what's happening is we're identified with thought. I try to tell people this as something to think about learning. Throughout your day, as often as you possibly can, ask this question. Stop yourself and say, "Where am I? And what am I feeling right now?" And put all your attention. Right now I'm in this garage at this place and the thing. I'm sitting in my car. Okay, this is what's real. And then I ask myself, what I'm feeling. If I'm feeling any anxiety, tension, or fear, unless a lion is chasing me, it's because I'm identified with a thought, not even anything that's real, because the only thing that's real is I'm sitting in this car and I'm totally fine. And I actually have an IPA with me that I took from the studio when I walked out. So in reality, everything is okay. So all this suffering that we go through is because we get so ingrained in believing the movie in our head is real that we suffer. I could be sitting here going, "Oh my God, the world's falling. I can't pay my bill." Ah! And the reality is I'm sitting in the car with my IPA.
Man,
everything
awesome.
is okay. And the other thing people don't realize, and this one gets me, is you realize there's only one moment. It's always the same moment. You never can leave the moment. It's the same moment. I can walk across the room. I can go there. The moment hasn't changed. It's the same. There's only one moment in time. And truthfully, time is a complete illusion. It's something we create in our heads. So the more we start to realize as humans that, wait, don't identify with that thought. That ego is insane. It's like we have to, once you start to look at your thinking, when you stop and ask that question, you're kind of waking up because you're like, wait a minute, you're identifying that the thought is in your head. Then you have that second realization is, well, who's watching? Is there two of me? Right? And that's when it gets wild because then you start going, holy cow, am I the thinker or am I the watcher? And that's where the journey starts. So, I believe that all the problems we have on the planet today are really just are tied to the fact that the mind is incapable of knowing truth from falsehood. It knows no right or wrong. The mind can't make that decision. Easy to prove. If the mind was able to know something, whether it was true or false, there'd be no war.
Right.
Because nobody that would be in there, anybody awake at any level, knows that taking a gun and blowing somebody up, or putting a bomb in my 5-year-old son's kid, blowing him up in the name of something is insane, right? Because it's identified with some belief system at the mind. So the way to solve the problem is, I call it's the human condition, is really we have to wake up and realize that we're just being kind of freaked out by all this stuff that's being hit up in the media and making us all crazy. So as society hopefully starts to wake up, we will start to see a better universe. Real quick, the good news is the universe doesn't need saving. The planet is fine. It will go on for another 4 or 5 billion years, whether we're here or not. So consciousness will unfold as it's supposed to, because everything happens the way it's supposed to happen.
No
Otherwise,
doubt.
it wouldn't happen. There you go.
Well, I didn't expect us to get that deep today, for sure. And I agree that the planet's going to go on for another 4 or 5 billion years, but I'm just asking for, like, I don't know, 30 or 40. You know, if I can,
Yeah, there you go.
just a few, just kind of hang out, savor the flavor a little bit. It's funny because I was definitely ego driven, and my audience knows this prior to it. And don't.
I had a sip of my beer.
That's all right. No, not a problem at all. For me personally, what ended up happening was I became an alcoholic, and I was ego driven to the point that when I couldn't pursue the ego anymore, I had to find something to fill that void, and I filled it with alcohol. And then I got sober, and life, it's only been about 6.5 years now. But hey, man, it is what it is. Whatever it takes to wake us up, if we're still here after that moment takes place, if you don't learn from it, man, I don't know. I can't grasp not learning from it, me personally.
Yeah, well, remember, inside all suffering is the seed of grace. That's where you always hear about people that hit rock bottom and then they turn their life around. Well, it gets to that point where you just say, stop the suffering and I need to wake up. That's why, for me, I took a really heavy inward journey. I guess we call it a spiritual journey. And again, no religion, no everything. I mean, I've read them all, everything from, the Quran to the Bible to all the Buddhist stuff, and listen to all the great avatars from Zona Rosa to Jesus, to Buddha. I mean, all of those guys, and they all point to that same thing, right?
Right.
That same essence of really happens, that sense of presence that happens when you go to no mind, no thinking. It's a place where you actually don't let this ego and stuff drive you crazy, and that what they call enlightenment, right? So that whole thing for me is there's nothing more important in your life to do that, because you're going to blink, you're going to be 50 years old, you're going to blink, you're going to be on your deathbed.
Exactly.
And it's going to be that fast. And so the key to life is to die before you die. And that means you surrender to what is. And that's the whole game, because once it is, it happens, it's done. Any suffering after that is completely made in your head and is insanity. It makes you insane, right? It's insane. I have a guy, he got a brand new car. His car got hit. And for 3 weeks, he's suffering. I'm saying, dude, your car was hit. You took it in. It's getting fixed. Let it go. Because why suffer over something that's already happened? So life is about one thing, surrendering to what is. Taking whatever happens in the moment, no matter what it is, and accepting it as if it was the way you wanted it to happen, right? That's the trick of life. That's what it's all about.
I agree 100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. That's why I have you here, so you can say it. So
well, it helps you with your music too, because for me, it's the greatest thing. I play music because I've learned now I realize when I play the best is when I'm not thinking anymore. I'm basically playing from a different space, and
Sure.
You see it. I mean, why do these little kids that are, 10 years old, like virtuosos and stuff? It's not because they've been trained in their mind, or there's something else that happens. And so for me, music is really the point I get closer to God, the source, consciousness, whatever anybody wants to call it. Unfortunately, when you call it something, you missed it, because you can't call it something because it isn't any of those things, because they create images and thoughts. But for me, it's like I get to play now, and my whole idea is I get in there and I get to the point now where I can stop thinking and I can just play, and I feel like I'm closer to God in the sense I'm merging with the source. So
no, I think that's phenomenal, and I've experienced that in martial arts myself. I mentioned that I was ego driven before, and it was ego And martial arts, I was kind of doing it wrong. You know, I mean, I competed and I like to fight. And sometimes I let the ego get ahead of me and I got myself in a little bit of trouble. But we managed to pull it out. But the thing that I definitely remember more than anything is I also went through a phase where I was breaking. You ever see karate guys break stuff, concrete and all that? Well, back then I weighed $155, 155 pounds, soaking wet. And the most I ever did in one strike was 2.25 feet of concrete. Now there were spacers, right? But what I would do is I experienced that same thing. Somehow I got into that zone, if you will, and was able to make that happen. Once my life started getting a little jacked up and my ego was getting ahead of me, I got to where I couldn't break anymore. I couldn't even break 4 bricks, much less 12. And I have never, ever experienced that zen, that zone, that whatever you want to call it. I've never experienced it again. Now, I get close with podcasting, but not quite. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, once you taste it, you become a fanatic. For me, I tasted it because I had a real down period of my life at a point where I was just suffering and going crazy with myself. And finally, I decided to do something about it. And I started getting into it and started reading and really started getting into a variety of things. And the book that really got me really started was a book called The Power of Now, which was Eckhart Tolle. It's a very famous book out there. And that book talked to me. And I remember reading that book 60 times in a row. And I would listen to it in my car, have Eckhart read it for 2 years. I made my car my shrine, and I would pray for traffic. I'd get in my car, go, please be traffic today. So I could be in here for hours listening to that stuff. And what was fascinating is I was feeling pretty good, right? Because when you get that stuff, you got the positive thing, you're going, and I'm thinking I'm really understanding, reading the book. Yeah, I understand. And then one day I woke up, I remember it was April 11th at 10:12 in the morning. I woke up and I got up and I rubbed my eyes and I went, holy crap, 50 something years went by. I blinked. And then I went, that's what they mean by time being an illusion, because they always talk about that fact because it was there. But here was the profound thing was I realized at that moment, the voice that was in my head, the same thing that was talking to me there when I was 5 years, nothing changed. That part of me was the same. And that was the moment I realized you don't die, right? Now, the profound thing was I went back and I read the Eckhart book again, and it was 180 degrees from what I thought it was from that moment. The words all changed, everything melted, and I went, holy crap, my ego made me believe that I knew and I understood, and I was all wrong. I missed it. I completely missed it. So one of the pointers they talk about, they say, as soon as you understand it, you missed it. And they're like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, you look back. Yeah.
What does it mean? Because remember, words are just pointers. They can only point to something. There is no word. You can't describe it because as soon as you label it, you missed it. So I'm wondering all these things. And it was right after that moment that happened to me that I went, and then everything shifted from that point on. It was just like, it was crazy.
But see, I don't think you can get it unless you've lived, unless you've been there, unless you've experienced it, unless you've made the mistakes, unless you've suffered, wallowed in that suffering. And I did that a lot with Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd makes suffering pretty easy. Some of them songs, some of the older albums.
There's a dark side to that stuff.
I'll tell you, my wife, she's fine with it, but my wife outlawed Pink Floyd because every time I was listening to Pink Floyd, I was what we call kicking rocks. I was depressed and I was suffering. So she said, no more Pink Floyd. You can't listen to Pink Floyd because that means you're depressed. And but of course, we had to come to an agreement that that's just not the case. But but it was an influence my whole life. But again, until you lived it and experience and overcome and have a rebirth of sorts, however that comes to you, you can't even know that you got it.
That's correct.
To back things up just a little bit, and I got to ask, now you may or may not know the reference, but who had the better hair? Was it you? Or was it the sax player from the Lost Boys?
Oh, dude, here's the deal. I was the original mullet guy, right? I had one of the original mullets. Who inspired me on that was I did a tour with Diana Ross.
Okay.
And I realized, talk about one of my mentors. She basically, dude, that girl changed my life big time as far as thinking and stuff. I mean, she was the one that taught me the power of patterns and things that I'll never forget. But I was on the tour and I was watching her and I noticed how her hair was lighting up and I had my short hair. And I said, dude, I got to figure out how to get people's attention and all that kind of stuff. So I ended up growing my hair, but I hated long hair. So I decided I needed to have long, short look. So I built the mullet. And I actually just saw a picture yesterday of it, which was really interesting, that somebody put, that was up on, you can see it on the web if you Google. It's when I was playing with Spinal Tap. I played a show with Spinal Tap at Radio City Music Hall. And when that happened, it's the funniest thing. The hair was down to my butt, but that was my whole thing. Long, short look, right? That was the whole idea.
Well, it was epic. I'll tell you that for sure. So, well, Scott, I know you're busy and I appreciate you just taking the time that you've given me right now. And it's awesome. It was definitely a moment and I'm so glad that I lived it and I will definitely savor it. So
thank you very much for having me on your show. Anytime, hit me up. I'd love to do it again. We can talk all kinds of stuff. I got a lot of stuff to talk about.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love to have you back on when you have a little more time and you're in a better position there. So, but hey, thank you so much for tonight. I appreciate it.
All right, my friend. Everything good? We good? Enough time there?
Everything's great. Yeah, we did just perfect. We're good. We are perfectly fine. Okay. So.
All right, excellent.
All right, man.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate you being on your show. And congratulations on being sober now. That's cool.
Yeah, man.
And
works for some
good
people.
Job, brother.
All right, take care of yourself.
All right, my friend.
All right, bye-bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.
You could be larger than life.